Hello, this is Miss Kyler, and I'm talking to you about Thomas Wyatt and a little bit about the Renaissance in his life. And also, I wanted to talk to you about a very important example of his poetry. Okay, so I've included the biography, and a lot of this information comes from Wikipedia, but I also cross-referenced it with other studies and research that I have done so that I made sure that it was reliable information. But one thing we notice is that Thomas Wyatt is a typical Renaissance man. And a typical Renaissance man is someone who would be wanting to work their way into the court of the king. He was well educated, he had traveled abroad, so he was well traveled, and he had worked his way into position at King Henry VIII's court. He also was into all the music and the culture and the poetry. It was something that a courtier was supposed to do, be able to appreciate art and culture and music and sonnets and things. He actually studied the Italian forms of the sonnet while he was abroad, and he brought those back with him to England. And so we can attribute a lot of what we study in poetry with the sonnets to Thomas Wyatt and his translations of Italian poems. So while Thomas Wyatt was working under King Henry VIII, that's one of his courtiers, he also was jailed several times. Okay, so his first imprisonment was for brawling, and 2 years later, his relationship with Anne Boleyn resulted in a short spell in the Tower of London. So Thomas and Anne had been lovers before her marriage to Henry, but of course Henry was looking for any reason he could to accuse Anne Boleyn and Thomas Wyatt, and so Thomas Wyatt was put in the Tower, and Anne Boleyn was executed. The poem that we're going to talk about today is actually based on that situation because he wrote, a lot of people connect that Whoso List a Hunt to his relationship with Anne Boleyn. He was restored to favor in 1537. He had friends in court who spoke up for him at the time, and that's one thing, that there was a lot of court intrigue. People were accusing each other, but if you had a friend who could speak well and eloquently and petition in your favor, you could be restored to favor. However, when his patron, the one who spoke up for him, was executed, he did not have an ally anymore. And of course, then he was accused, all those jealous people, there's all this intrigue, this jealousy. They accused him of treason, which is just a way to get him out of the way so someone could take his place. He was sent to the Tower, and he died soon afterward of the fever. Very sad. Again, being a courtier was the thing that they envied very much. People wanted to be, and yet it was something that was very dangerous. So here's a little bit of some facts here. Anne Boleyn was the second wife of Henry VIII after Henry's infamous divorce from Catherine of Aragon. Thomas Wyatt was one of Anne's admirers, and he was arrested in May 1536. Anne and Wyatt most likely indulged in courtly flirtation, as was expected at court. Kind of remember, this is an offshoot of the courtly love triangle. Whoso List a Hunt is Wyatt's most famous poem relating to Anne Boleyn. The clear impression given is that of a one-sided pursuit by the poet, rather than a relationship between the two. He's pining after her like a knight, and she is always fleeing away from him and shunning him. It sounds as though he has to make himself break his fascination with Anne. By this stage, anyway, only one man would have been in the running, Henry. Anne Boleyn gave birth to Elizabeth I, after which she had a series of miscarriages. Due to her inability to provide a male heir, King Henry VIII had her charged with high treason. As you can see, being charged with high treason does not mean that you were necessarily a traitor. They use that very broadly to get rid of whoever they want out of the way. Wyatt was a captain of the Tower, and he was forced to watch as Anne Boleyn was executed. So let's look at the sonnet. The sonnet was considered the ideal poetic form of the Renaissance period. Now, after Thomas Wyatt, there were 2 types of sonnets in England. There was an Italian sonnet, which Thomas Wyatt actually helped develop based on his travels abroad, and then the English sonnet, which was more traditional, more associated with Shakespeare. In fact, the Italian sonnet is sometimes called the Petrarchan sonnet because a poet named Petrarch wrote these in Italy. And the English sonnet is sometimes called the Shakespearean sonnet because Shakespeare used that form most of the time. Now you'll notice there are some similarities. All sonnets have 14 lines, so if you see a poem that has 14 lines, you can immediately think, ah, that must be a sonnet. They're all in iambic pentameter. I'm going to explain that in a minute. And they're both separated in two different parts. Now the way they're separated is different. With the Italian sonnet, the two parts are called the octave and the sestet. An octave is a stanza of 8 lines, and a sestet is a stanza of 6 lines. The English sonnet, on the other hand, is separated into sections also, but is separated between 3 quatrains and then a rhyming couplet. A quatrain is a stanza of 4 lines, so there's 3 stanzas of 4 lines, and it ends with a rhyming couplet, which means 2 lines next to each other that rhyme. Okay, so the octave in the Italian sonnet is where we present a problem, question, or quandary, whereas in the English sonnet we do that with the quatrains. Okay, in the sestet we present the solution, answer, or resolution. In the English sonnet that happens in the rhyming couplet, just those last 2 lines of the poem. And the little spot between the octave and the sestet, or between the 3 quatrains and the rhyming couplet, is called the volta, where there's a change from the questioning tone to the certain, more confident, more answering, resolute tone at the end. Okay, so volta are also called the turn. Okay, let's explain iambic pentameter a little bit. Okay, so an iamb is a type of foot. When we talk about the foot, we're talking about a unit of poetic accent. Okay, so whenever you see if there's 2 accented and 1 unaccented and it all goes together, that's a foot. Or 1 unaccented, 1 accented, that's a foot. Okay, that has an offbeat followed by a strong beat. So every time we see an offbeat and a strong beat, there's 2 syllables, but it's 1 foot. Okay, so da-dum, that's the iambic foot. Okay. Now when we talk about pentameter, we mean there's 5 feet, 5 da-dums in a line of poetry. Okay. So here's an example. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 10 syllables, but there's 5 feet. Da-dum, 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 da-dum. So that's what we mean by iambic. So here is Whoso List a Hunt, one of Sir Thomas Wyatt's most famous poems. Thomas Wyatt was the one who helped introduce the sonnet to England through his translations of the sonnets written by the Italian poet Petrarch. And many believe that this is a poem about Wyatt's unrequited love for Anne Boleyn, the tragic love affair there. Now, one thing I want you to notice is now we're looking at things not in translation. This is the original language. So there may be some words that seem kind of old-fashioned, but now it looks so much more easy to understand than if we were looking at Old English or even at Norman English. So this is an Italian sonnet. So let's break it down a little bit. First, the first 8 lines, that's the octave, and that's where we present the quandary or the question or the problem. Whoso list a hunt, I know wherein a hind, but as for me, alas, I may no more. The vain travail hath wearied me so sore, I am of them that farthest cometh behind. Yet may I by no means my wearied mind draw from the deer, but as she fleeth afore, fainting I follow. I leave off, therefore, since in a net I seek to hold the wind. And then the last 6 lines, that's the sestet, and that's where we present the resolution. Who list her hunt, I put him out of doubt, as well as I may spend his time in vain. And graven with diamonds in letters plain, there is written her fair neck round about, Noli me tangere, for Caesar's I am, and wild for to hold, though I seem tame. So let's explain this a little bit. So in the octave, that's the quandary. What it's saying is this. If you feel like hunting, I know where there is a female deer. A hind is a female deer. But for me, I can't go on like this. The worthless struggle has worn me out so much that I straggle behind all the rest of the hunters. I can't stop thinking of her. As she runs away from me, I almost fainting follow after her. I can't help but keep trying to get her. Finally, I give up since I'm trying to hold the wind in a net. And the sestet presents the resolution, and this is what it's saying. If you feel like hunting, I'll give you some advice, for you too may spend your time in vain. etched with diamonds in plain letters, she has a sign about her pretty neck that says, Noli me tangere, no one can touch me, for I belong to the king, and I am too wild to be held, though you may think that I am tame. Pretty interesting, the comparison between the woman and the deer, and the hunt and the pursuit of a loved one. We kind of see that parallel, remember in Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, where there was that parallel of the Lord, hunting outside and Sir Gawain pursuing the woman inside the house. So basically the octave is saying, I'm in love, but my love is unrequited. And then at the end, it's basically saying, guys, don't even try. She is off limits. She's already married. So again, we see that revisitation of the courtly love triangle, still the offshoots of that concept, but also the concept of comitatus, because now it's become more of a thing where, okay, we commiserate with my fellow courtiers, just like the knights and Sir Gawain and the Green Knight commiserated with him in his shame when he wore the green girdle. Now we have the courtiers, even though they're normally struggling against each other and trying to accuse each other and all this court intrigue, but when it comes to women, I know we all need to support one another, and because we all are desiring these women, and they're over there and we're over here, and let's support one another in our vain attempts to win them over. Kind of that sort of thing. So I hope you've enjoyed this lecture, and go back and listen to it as often as you need to. Thank you. Bye.